The hurricane ripped through our neighborhood like a monster, flattening million-dollar homes in minutes. Families lost everything, except me. My house, the only one left standing, became a target overnight. Instead of asking how I protected it, the HOA president, Vivian, accused me of causing the storm. She claimed my reinforcements diverted the winds and destroyed everyone else's property. And then, she demanded I pay the entire community $10 million. Neighbors I'd helped for years turned on me, spitting lies, pointing fingers, and calling me a criminal. They wanted a scapegoat. They chose me. But what they didn't know was, I had proof that would destroy them. My name is Andre Lewis. I'm 45 years old, an engineer, and a father of 2. I've spent my entire life believing that hard work, preparation, and integrity could shield a man from the chaos of this world. But I was wrong. Because nothing, not even surviving a hurricane, prepared me for what my neighbors would do next. For months before the storm, I watched the forecasts, read every update, and made my decision. I wasn't going to gamble with my family's safety. I poured my savings into reinforcing our home. Hurricane glass for every window. Steel braces for the foundation. A roof bolted into place with industrial anchors. My neighbors laughed at me. Andre, you're wasting money. The HOA has us covered. But I knew better. I'd seen too many lives destroyed by false promises. When the hurricane finally struck, it was like standing inside the roar of an engine that never stopped. Winds tearing trees out of the ground, rain smashing down in sheets, roofs ripping away one after another. But inside our home, inside the fortress I built, my children slept. My wife held my hand. And I knew I had done the right thing. By dawn, when the storm finally passed, I walked outside into a graveyard of shattered glass and splintered wood. Mansions reduced to piles of rubble. Luxury cars underwater. Neighbors screaming in disbelief. And there, in the middle of it all, stood my house, scarred, but still standing. I thought, for one moment, that maybe this would earn me respect. That maybe people would say, Andre was smart. Andre prepared. But the looks I saw on their faces weren't admiration. They were filled with anger. Resentment. Envy. It started with whispers. How did his house survive when ours didn't? Then accusations. He must have done something unnatural. By the end of that same week, I was summoned to the HOA clubhouse. Vivian Prescott, the HOA president, sat at the head of the table in her designer suit, papers spread before her like a queen holding court. She didn't smile. She didn't ask if my family was safe. Instead, she pointed her manicured finger at me and said, "We know what you did, Andre. You caused this. And you're going to pay." At first, I thought it was some cruel joke. But when she slid the legal documents across the table, my chest went cold. A lawsuit. $10 million. Their claim? That my reinforcements altered the natural flow of wind currents, redirecting destruction onto their homes. I looked around that room. These were my neighbors. People I'd barbecued with. People whose kids played with mine. And every single one of them sat there, nodding, glaring, demanding I confess to something impossible. That was the moment I realized the hurricane wasn't the worst storm I'd face. The real storm was just beginning. When word of the lawsuit spread, it was like a second hurricane, this one made of whispers, rumors, and poison. Everywhere I went, I could feel eyes on me. Parents pulled their kids away when mine walked by. At the grocery store, I heard the muttered words, "That's him, the one who made the storm worse." At first, I tried to laugh it off. How could anyone believe such nonsense? Hurricanes are forces of nature, not man-made weapons. But lies move faster than truth, and in a neighborhood where envy already ran deep, the lie had power. It started at school. My son came home with tears in his eyes after a teacher overheard classmates sneering, "Your dad cursed the storm." My daughter found her locker vandalized, painted with the words, "Stormmaker." My wife, normally strong, broke down in the kitchen one night, whispering, "Andre, they're turning the kids into outcasts." Meanwhile, Vivian Prescott was everywhere. She held HOA emergency meetings where she painted me as a villain. She told grieving families I had tampered with nature, that my house redirected winds like some giant shield. And because she spoke with authority, because she wore pearls and held a gavel, people believed her. The clubhouse became a courtroom before the real trial even began. I was summoned again and again, forced to sit while my neighbors stood up one by one to condemn me. One man shouted, "My roof collapsed on my wife's hospital bed, because of you." Another woman screamed, "My insurance won't cover my loss because they say the damage was unnatural. And you're the reason why." I tried to explain. Calmly. Rationally. I told them about permits, building codes, reinforcements, things anyone could have done if they prepared. But every word out of my mouth was twisted into arrogance. To them, my survival wasn't proof of preparation. It was proof of guilt. The tension escalated beyond meetings. One night, I came home to find eggs smashed against my garage door. Another morning, my tires had been slashed. When I called the police, the officer just shrugged. "Sounds like a neighbor dispute. Nothing we can do." Vivian's hold on the HOA grew stronger with every lie she spread. She filed official complaints accusing me of endangering community safety. She demanded I be banned from meetings unless escorted. And then came the public spectacle, the day she staged a press conference right in front of my house. Cameras flashed as she stood on my lawn, waving the lawsuit in the air, shouting, "This man destroyed our homes. He owes this community $10 million. I stood inside my living room, watching through the blinds as reporters scribbled notes and neighbors cheered. My kids were curled up on the couch, terrified. My wife gripped my hand and asked the question I'd been dreading, "Andre, what if they win?" I didn't have an answer. Because the truth was, I wasn't just fighting rumors anymore. I was fighting an entire system stacked against me. The HOA had money. They had influence. They had neighbors willing to testify. And all I had was the truth. But in a world blinded by anger and envy, sometimes the truth isn't enough. The courthouse smelled like old wood and tension. Every seat was filled, neighbors clutching folders, reporters whispering, cameras waiting to capture the moment I'd be torn apart. Vivian Prescott walked in like she owned the place, draped in pearls and arrogance, HOA board members trailing behind her like disciples. She didn't even look at me. To her, I wasn't a man. I was prey. Her lawyers wasted no time painting me as a villain. They spoke with fire in their voices, waving charts and maps, claiming my reinforced house had redirected hurricane winds into vulnerable homes. They played shaky cell phone videos of me inspecting my roof days before the storm, twisting it into evidence that I'd done something sinister. Neighbors took the stand one by one, pointing their fingers at me like I was a criminal. He smiled when we warned him not to overbuild. I saw his lights on during the storm, like he was enjoying our suffering. The words weren't evidence. They were poison. And every drop was meant to drown me. But then it was our turn. My lawyer, Caleb Daniels, a man who believed in facts over fear, rose to his feet and changed the air in that room. He called meteorologists, engineers, building inspectors. Each one testified that my reinforcements were legal, standard, and scientifically incapable of changing the path of a hurricane. Nature does not bend to one man's house, one expert said firmly. This lawsuit has no scientific basis. Vivian shifted in her seat, lips pressed tight. She wasn't used to resistance. Caleb didn't stop there. He began digging deeper, not just into the storm, but into the HOA itself. He subpoenaed records, forcing Vivian to hand over financial documents she had hidden for years. At first, she smirked, confident her lies would hold. But when Caleb spread those papers across the courtroom projector, the truth cracked open like thunder. The HOA wasn't broke because of me. It was broke because of her. There it was in black and white, embezzled funds, fraudulent contracts, money siphoned into shell companies Vivian controlled. While she accused me of stealing safety, she had been stealing from the very people now screaming in her defense. The courtroom buzzed with whispers. Neighbors looked at one another, faces pale. Some still glared at me, unwilling to admit the truth. But others began to see it, Vivian's mask slipping right in front of them. When Caleb pressed her on the stand, Vivian snapped. Her polished image shattered as she ranted about undeserving outsiders and people who don't belong in this neighborhood. Her words dripped with venom, revealing what this had really been about all along. Not hurricanes. Not safety. But prejudice. Control. Envy. By the time she finished screaming, the judge's gavel came down hard. Enough. In that moment, I knew the storm inside that courtroom was finally turning. The final day of the trial felt like waiting for a second hurricane to land. I walked into that courtroom with my family at my side, every step heavy with fear and hope. Neighbors packed the benches, some glaring with arms crossed, others shifting uncomfortably now that the cracks in Vivian's story had begun to show. Vivian herself looked different. Gone was the calm, polished queen of the HOA. Her hair was frayed, her voice sharp and brittle. But she still carried herself like she owned the room, as if intimidation alone could bend justice. Her lawyers made one last desperate push. They waved photos of destroyed homes, families crying, debris scattered across lawns. This devastation, they cried, is because of Andre Lewis. He must be held accountable. He must pay. For a moment, the silence after their words felt crushing. All eyes turned to me, as though waiting for me to crumble under the weight of it. But then Caleb rose, his voice steady and firm. He didn't start with charts or experts. He started with the truth. Andre Lewis did not cause this storm, he said. He prepared for it. He invested his savings, his sweat, his time, because he cared about his family's safety. And for that, you want to punish him. Then he walked to the projector and displayed the HOA financial records again. Line after line of stolen money. Signatures from Vivian herself. Fraud hidden in plain sight. If anyone in this courtroom destroyed this community, Caleb thundered, it wasn't Andre. It was the very person who now dares to call herself your leader. Vivian snapped. She shot out of her seat, shouting over him. He doesn't belong here. People like him, outsiders, don't deserve to have more than the rest of us. He thinks he's better than us. Her words hung in the air, venomous and raw. Gasps rippled through the room. The mask was gone. This was no longer about hurricanes or houses, it was about prejudice, envy, and power. The judge leaned forward, his gavel striking like thunder. Order! Enough of this circus. This case is dismissed with prejudice. He looked directly at Vivian. And I strongly advise this court pursue an investigation into the HOA's financial practices. The room erupted. Some neighbors stormed out, furious that their scapegoat had slipped through their fingers. Others sat frozen, realizing for the first time how deeply they had been manipulated. My wife gripped my hand until it hurt. My children, for the first time in weeks, smiled. And me? I just sat there in silence, letting the weight of it all crash down. I had survived the storm outside, and now I had survived the storm within these walls. But deep down, I knew this battle had changed me forever. When the gavel struck and the case was dismissed, I should have felt nothing but relief. And in a way, I did. The weight pressing on my chest for weeks finally lifted. But walking out of that courtroom, I realized something far more unsettling. Storms don't just come from the sky. Sometimes, they come from the people standing right next to you. Outside, reporters swarmed. Cameras flashed in my face, microphones shoved toward me. Andre, how does it feel to walk free? Do you think your neighbors will ever accept you again? I didn't answer. Because the truth was, I didn't know. Some neighbors avoided my eyes as I passed, shame heavy on their shoulders. A few offered quiet apologies, muttering that they were misled, that they didn't know what Vivian was hiding. But others still glared at me with raw resentment. For them, I would always be the villain, no matter what the court said. At home, my children finally laughed again. They ran through the hallways, their joy returning as if a cloud had lifted. My wife hugged me tighter than ever, whispering, "We made it, Andre. We survived." But I could still see the questions in her eyes. Would this ever truly be over? Could we go back to living among people who had once cheered for my downfall? Weeks later, the investigation into Vivian exploded across the news. Fraud, embezzlement, tax evasion, her empire of lies collapsed overnight. She was arrested, her designer dresses replaced with handcuffs. The same neighbors who once defended her now spit her name like poison. But even with her gone, the damage remained. Trust had been broken. I stood outside my house one evening, staring at the walls I had reinforced with my own hands. Those walls had saved my family from the hurricane. But they couldn't protect us from envy, from prejudice, from the ugly truths people hide behind manicured lawns and HOA rules. I realized then, survival isn't just about building stronger walls. It's about having the strength to face storms you never asked for, the storms of lies, hate, and fear. So when people ask me, "Andre, how did you survive the hurricane?" I tell them this. The hurricane wasn't the hardest part. Surviving my neighbors was. And in that truth, I found my own kind of victory. This ordeal changed me forever. I learned that the fiercest storms don't always come from the sky, they come from the hearts of people blinded by envy, fear, and prejudice. The hurricane tested my house, but the lies tested my soul. And even when the world turned against me, the truth stood tall. Vivian's downfall proved one thing: justice can survive even in the darkest storms. My family was spared, not just by the walls I built, but by the strength to stand when everyone else wanted me to fall. And if this story moved you, if it made you think about how quickly people can turn, or how vital it is to fight back when lies spread, then don't just walk away. Hit that like button, share this story with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe so you never miss the next one. And tell me in the comments, what would you have done if your neighbors accused you of causing a hurricane? Because sometimes, survival is only the beginning.